Hey everyone! Today I'm going to tell you a true story that you won't believe. You might think it sounds like a made-up story, but every part of it is true. This is a tale that involves something that changed history. It's a mysterious discovery that has remained hidden for centuries. And now we will finally uncover the truth. But be careful, because some secrets are better left buried in the past. This is one of those cases. It all began in a quiet little town in 1968. Life was peaceful and uneventful until one day, when everything changed. A group of archaeologists was excavating a site when suddenly they uncovered something amazing. They had stumbled upon a tomb that contained a secret that had been lost for hundreds of years. As they carefully opened the tomb, they found a mummified body inside. But this wasn't just any ordinary mummy. This was the mummy of a woman who was unlike any other. She was a high-ranking official from the Egyptian Empire, someone who had held great power and influence in her time. As the archaeologists continued to explore the tomb, they found all kinds of amazing artifacts, things that had belonged to the woman and had been buried with her. Among these artifacts were scrolls that contained ancient texts written in hieroglyphics. At first glance, these scrolls looked like they were just old pieces of paper. But when the archaeologists deciphered the hieroglyphics, they realized that they were holding something truly special. These scrolls contained knowledge that had been lost for centuries. They talked about things that the ancient Egyptians believed were myths and legends, things that we now know to be true. For example, the scrolls talked about a time when the earth had been destroyed by a great flood, a time when only a few people had survived. They also talked about a time when the earth had been struck by a large object from the sky, an object that had caused massive destruction and had led to the end of the Old Kingdom. These scrolls were a treasure trove of information. The archaeologists knew that they had stumbled upon something truly amazing. They carefully preserved the scrolls and took them back to the lab for further study. But as time went on, the world started to forget about the scrolls and the amazing discovery that had been made. The story of the mysterious mummy and her hidden tomb became a thing of the past, or so it seemed. However, the truth is that the scrolls continue to hold their secrets close, waiting for someone to come along and unlock their mysteries. And that someone was a young man named John. John was an aspiring historian who was fascinated by ancient Egypt. He had spent years studying the history of the Egyptians and their culture, and he had learned everything he could from books and scrolls, but he wanted more. He wanted to make his own discoveries and to uncover the secrets of the past. So when he heard about the mysterious mummy and her hidden tomb, he was eager to learn more. He traveled to the museum where the artifacts from the tomb were being held, and he spent hours poring over the exhibits. He studied the hieroglyphics on the walls, and he examined the artifacts that had been found in the tomb. And then he saw them, the scrolls. They were hidden away in a vault, but John was determined to get a closer look. He asked the museum curator if he could examine the scrolls, and the curator agreed. As John unrolled the first scroll, he felt a shiver run down his spine. The hieroglyphics were unlike anything he had seen before, and he could feel that they were trying to tell him something important. With the help of a team of experts, he began to decipher the writing, and as each word was revealed, felt like he was unlocking a secret that had been hidden for centuries. The scrolls told the story of a time when the world was very different, a time when the Egyptians believed that the gods walked among them. They talked about a time when the earth had been flooded, and when it had been struck by objects from the sky. But there was more. The scrolls also talked about a time when the Egyptians had been visited by beings from another world, beings who were unlike anyone they had ever seen before. These beings were said to be incredibly advanced, and they possessed technology that was far beyond the Egyptians' own. They had come from a world where everything was made of metal, and where there were no rivers or seas. The Egyptians were both fascinated and terrified by these visitors from another world, and they tried to learn everything they could about them. But the scrolls also hinted at a darker side to these visitors. It seemed like they were not only sharing knowledge, but they were also taking something away from the Egyptians, something that was precious and that should not have been taken. The Egyptians believed that the visitors had stolen their gods, and they were furious. As John read these stories, he couldn't help but wonder what had really happened all those years ago. Had the Egyptians been visited by aliens? And if so, what had they taken from them? And why? What was so important about it? He knew that there were many skeptics out there who would say that these were just stories, that they weren't real. But John wasn't so sure. He felt like there was more to the story, and he was determined to uncover the truth. So John decided to take matters into his own hands. He traveled to Egypt to see if he could find any evidence of the Egyptians' visitors. He explored ancient sites and he pored over artifacts, hoping to find some connection to the stories in the scrolls. He met with locals and listened to their stories, hoping to find some clues that could lead him to the truth. But as time went on, he started to lose hope. It seemed like the truth of what had happened all those years ago might never be known, but then he remembered something. The scrolls had mentioned a time when the Egyptians' gods had been taken. Could it be that the Egyptians' beliefs had been distorted over time? Could it be that the stories of their gods were actually stories of aliens and their advanced technology? With this new theory in mind, John started his investigation all over again. He pored over ancient texts and artifacts looking for any evidence that could support his theory, and then he found it. In an ancient temple, he discovered a carving that depicted a being that was unlike any Egyptian god. It had features that were distinctly alien-like, and it was holding a staff that looked like a modern-day laser gun. John felt like he had finally found proof of the Egyptians' visitors. He knew that there were still skeptics out there who would argue against his theory. But he was more convinced than ever that the stories in the scrolls were true. He realized that the Egyptians had actually been visited by aliens, and that they had taken something from them that had changed history forever. But what was that something? And why had they taken it? John still doesn't have the answers to these questions, but he's still searching for them. He knows that the truth is out there, and he's determined to find it. What do you think? Do you believe John's story? Do you think the stories in the scrolls are just that? Stories? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.